Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook. This podcast is inspired by a Quincy Jones quote I heard 5 years ago when I started Harmonious World back in lockdown. What I found was him saying, "Imagine what a harmonious world it would be if everyone shared a little of what they are good at." And what I started doing in 2020 that I'm still doing now 5 years later is chatting with musicians. And it doesn't really matter to me what type of musician they are, where they are on their musical journey. I find it absolutely fascinating. I'm a bit of a sax player anyway, but I'm just surrounded by music all the time. And you may know that I am also a journalist, so I write reviews of albums and live gigs, and you can find those. Actually, the links are all in the show notes. For this episode, I'm joined by New York sax player Dave Anderson. What you're listening to now is Sanctuary, which is one of the tracks on Dave Anderson's new album In Lieu of Flowers. I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Dave Anderson. Welcome to Harmonious World. I'm joined by New York saxophonist Dave Anderson. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Hilary. Nice to be on the show today.
So you've got this new album out now, which is called In Lieu of Flowers, which I really like. I like the title. I think it's a great title.
Thank you.
How did you come up with that title?
Yeah, well, I've always found people to be the strongest inspirations for writing music. And so over the years, I've written a number of tribute songs to people. Some of them have appeared on prior album projects, one or two here and there. But this time around, I think 7 of the 10 songs in this album are tributes to people, either jazz luminaries like Maria Schneider and Wayne Shorter, or family influences or friends, people in the neighborhood that I live in here in Brooklyn, and and so it became apparent that this was really a tribute album to people, and so I was thinking about in thinking about the title, I was thinking about how we don't often enough pay appreciation to the people in our lives, the people who help to shape our worlds. Sometimes not until they're gone, but even that can be a good catalyst for honoring people. And so I decided to call the album In Lieu of Flowers.
Yeah. Just to clarify, Maria Schneider is not dead. She's still with us, very much with us.
Of
And in fact,
course.
yes,
And I
she.
should say, as are
Sorry.
some of the other people that I've written tributes to, but yes, and it's
Yeah.
worth clarifying. She's very active on the scene and is a real inspiration to this day.
Oh, absolutely. She was one of my first guests 5 years ago, and she was just so inspirational. And then I saw her performing earlier this year in the Barbican in London, which was great
Mhm.
with a Norwegian band. Actually, it was really interesting. So these are all your dedication. I love the idea that, for a start, for people like Maria, it's making a statement about how in how much of an impression they make while they're still around, and for others like Wayne Shorter, it's when sadly they've already passed. But I love the idea of sort of having music in place of flowers.
Yeah, me too. And in terms of Maria, when I was writing a tune uh, for her, I was thinking about her graceful conducting style. Uh, the New York City jazz scene can be a fairly macho scene, even more so 30 years ago when I first arrived here. And I used to go down to a place called Vigiones and hear her play with a big band, mostly men, very talented musicians. Everybody wanted to play with her, play her music. And to watch her conduct as I think somebody who was briefly a ballerina growing up, she had such a graceful conducting style, and I decided to call the song Arms of Maria.
And it feels like when she's conducting that her arms are encompassing all of the people on stage, but then also all of us as well. She does that a lot, actually, doesn't she? That sort of lifting her arms movement.
She does, and it seems to make the flow of the music happen. It seems to mirror what's happening and drawing out feelings in the music for the performers and the audience.
Yeah. So there's 10 tracks on this album, and they're all originals. Is that right?
That is right, all original material.
But they were written over a period of time, I think. Is that correct?
It is true. There was a song or two that I completed just for this album, but some of these had been sitting, waiting for the right project to become attached to. There's a song I wrote after a visit to Leningrad when it was still called Leningrad. Very impactful visit as a young student to see that place now called St. Petersburg. And then there was a song that I wrote after the passing of my mother 20 years ago. I had created at the recommendation of a book on processing the loss of a parent, I had created a little haven in the corner of my small New York City apartment, a place to have some pictures and mementos, so that when I wanted to be thinking about that, I could enter that place. And when I felt that I was done and wanted to move on with my day, keeping a balance with everyday life, I would move out of there. And one day I left that space and went straight to the piano and wrote the song called Sanctuary.
Yeah. And that is that you actually you're on soprano on that. Is that right? Is that one?
That's right. I play soprano. That is the one duo track on what is otherwise a quartet album with Grant Richards, the fantastic piano player.
Right. And I think the sense of it being a duo, that track being a duo, is almost like the mother-son relationship, isn't it?
You know, I hadn't thought about that previously, but
okay.
it's probably why it works. And now that you mention it, my mother was a talented piano player.
There.
And
Yeah.
and I did not realize how important musical dreams were to her until she visited me in New York City, and I took her to Carnegie Hall, and we heard Martha Argerich and Charles Dutoit, and I think the Montreal Symphony. They did the Ravel Concerto, and afterwards, my mother told me that her piano teacher had told her that she could aspire to be a concert pianist one day, and she said, you know, when Martha Argerich was playing, I was up on stage there for a while.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It can do that, can't it? When you go and see somebody perform and you do feel like you're there, really there.
Yes. So to your point, maybe this was a chance to play a duo.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. At this point in the conversation, I'd like to play a clip from One for Wayne, because I'm a big Wayne Shorter fan as well.
sure.
What was the inspiration for composing that piece?
Yeah, Wayne Shorter is has always been an inspiration as a tenor and soprano saxophonist, as a composer first. Um, and but I had some chords that reminded me of Wayne. There were some progressions, some devices that he used that I was thinking about on the piano, and I started to write out the chords, and I was thinking this will be an opportunity to write a tune for Wayne Shorter. It has a couple of little hooks, a little tributes to songs like Deluge or Speak No Evil, but very small, I hope. I'm not trying to be too derivative, but to just um, take some of these things as a nudge. And then I wrote a melody over it. I wrote the chords before Wayne passed. I wrote the melody afterwards and prepared it for this album.
It is a lovely, lovely tribute. So, Sandy's Ladies, talk to me about that track.
Mhm. Yeah, you know, most of us in the music world have a pandemic story about music, and my story was that I went as soon as the pandemic happened. I went from New York City to Vancouver, Canada, for 2 years to be with my sweetheart. And and while I was there, I thought, you know, there's thin walls in this apartment. I'm not going to play a lot of saxophone. I don't have gigs to prepare for. So this is a chance to learn the guitar. So an old friend of mine from Seattle named Sandy Carter agreed to start teaching me guitar on Zoom. And so we would meet every week and we would chat, and he showed me a lot of things. So this song I wrote on the guitar. I was using a technique called hammer-ons and pull-offs, a guitar executional technique. And, you know, I got to something a little different than I would have on the saxophone or the piano because I was using that instrument. The song is called Sandy's Ladies because this friend of mine was around the rock scene in California in the 70s. He he became a hot rod aficionado, but at this phase of life, he was happy to play steel guitar, to take care of his wonderful grandchildren, granddaughters, and I saw this kind of progression from macho guy to sweet soul, and so the song is called Sandy's Ladies. In the execution of it, we it ended up becoming a Latin tune. The band took it to places where there's montunos happening, and you know, it was a very celebratory track, but it was not intended to sound like Sandy's music.
Right, right. Yeah. But sometimes tunes go in a different direction, don't they, to what you first had in mind.
They do, and Herbie Hancock, the great composer and piano player, has said that it's important to listen to where a song wants to go, and don't try to force it to go somewhere. Listen to where it can go, and take it there, and you'll probably be more pleased with the outcome.
Yeah, yeah. They do have a life of their own sometimes, don't they?
They do, they do.
So can you tell my listeners a little bit about your background? How did you get here?
Well, I grew up in a small town in Minnesota called Cloquet, Minnesota. It was a paper mill town. And I started to play through school music programs. My brother used to bring home jazz big band recordings. Sometimes older brothers can help clue you into good music. I got to see what the saxophone could really do and sound like. I had some wonderful educational opportunities there to play music, to be in regional groups, to go to a local jazz festival at University of Minnesota Duluth, where I would spend some time as an undergrad. And at that time, being in a small town, half of what I learned about jazz was from listening to albums and reading the back of vinyl LP jackets. There was nobody else to whisper in my ear what was really going on, and so I came reliant on liner notes and things like that. Later, did some jazz radio, and then, of course, played music through college. At a certain point, I decided to move to New York, and I've been there for most of the time since, with sojourns to Vancouver and Seattle as well.
Fantastic. So now this album is out. Are you touring it?
We just had a release event for the album here in Brooklyn at a place called Shapeshifter Lab. I am working on next performances. I would love to take the band out locally, regionally, and perhaps even internationally. I don't have a date to promote on the calendar. I'm also doing a fair amount of blogging and sharing videos from the album, and yeah, thinking about the best ways to get the music out there.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about the rest of the quartet? How you chose those people? Are they the people you play with regularly?
They are people I have played with. Uh, you know, here in the neighborhood, I heard a trio of the bassist Lauren Cohen, who I've known for several years, and in it he had the piano player Grant Richards. I really liked the rapport that they had together. Um, I also like to write. Recently, I'm writing more music with bass lines doubled in the piano, and so counterpoints to the melody um, and building more things from the bottom up. And so it was great that there was a piano player and bass player who had this kind of personal rapport to be able to play that kind of music. We also brought into the project uh, Jimmy McBride, who's a very in-demand drummer. He just got back from touring with Mark Turner in Japan and his talented spouse Miki Yakanama, if I'm saying her name correctly, and uh, and so they really gelled well as a group, and really pleased with how the group came together. Was able to get them back for the album release event, and hopefully be able to play that music with them going forward.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, well, I hope that you can maybe bring it to the UK at some point.
That would be lovely. Always love suggestions for the right venues.
Oh yeah, well I can I'll happily give you some great venues that you can contact because there's some really amazing ones in London. There's the obvious big ones, but there are some really nice sort of niche ones which are really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Is Pizza Express still active and presenting
Yeah.
jazz?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, very
terrific.
much so. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember being in London once and uh, being on the schedule to meet somebody for coffee and realizing that John Sermon was playing across town at a Pizza Express, and I thought there's somebody I always wanted to hear that I could probably only hear here, and
Yeah.
uh, and I know there's those kind of opportunities there in London. Uh,
Yeah.
I also hear that there's some new things happening stylistically and kind of in a local scene that's taking on a shape of its own.
Yeah, definitely. There are some really interesting things going on. And it was interesting you were talking about Maria Schneider because there's a young composer called Claire Cope who is doing some really, really interesting things with, sort of I think it's a nonette but anyway, it's a small big band, and that's really interesting. Yeah, there's some great stuff going on. It really is constantly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'm hearing good things about it and would love to dig in a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, you're very welcome anytime.
Well, thank you. It's exciting to see how jazz takes root, the jazz process in different parts of the world. How the folk music from a region can come into play. I remember being in Austria in the winter ski season and going to a resort in Bad Hofgastein. And there was a little jazz club up in the mountains, and there was a group that was playing. Conservatory trained musicians from Graz were playing uh, folk music. There was a group called B Folk, and those kinds of experiences. It's always nice to hear what this process can do within a cultural context, and how people can put their own lineage, heritage, and life into the music.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I think one of the things that Pizza Express is particularly good at is bringing music that from elsewhere in Europe. So there's some really exciting stuff going on, and it's interesting you say that about the folk music link because there's quite a lot of that from across Europe, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I heard you interview a Scottish musician on the podcast, another saxophonist. and heard some of those influences in their music. And it's happened across Scandinavia.
Yeah,
They've done a good job of taking folk music for many years into a jazz process,
yeah,
and it's inspiring. And growing up here in the States, the there is a lot of tradition, a lot of music has come out of here, and it's easy to get very focused on that. But uh, also the African American experience is so powerful and how it shaped this music.
yeah.
And I think it's important for an American musician to plug into that. At least that music resonates very strongly with me. But there are different angles that can be brought to this music.
Yeah, and it's when it all comes together, when you can get your influences from all over the place, and that's okay. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and the music needs to continue to cross pollinate and to evolve to stay fresh.
Yeah, and it feels like when I was growing up, I am a sax player of sorts,
Yes.
and um, when I was playing in the mainly the 80s and into the 90s, it was a lot of the sort of great American songbook stuff. Those were the standards that you had to know, and there didn't seem to be so much composition going on. I'm sure there was. I
Right.
mean, people like John Sermon were around then, Alan Barnes, those guys were doing their stuff then, but it felt like the audience needed the comfort and the safety of kind of songs that they could recognize.
Yes, and it's a bit of a dilemma for us today where we have this capacity to create original music and share our melodies with the world, and yet, yeah, jazz has become more disconnected from a popular songbook that people recognize. And so, how do we resolve that? Do we try to take today's popular music, as some have tried? I once recorded a Coldplay song that I like called "God Put a Smile on My Face," but one small attempt to try to relate, to take some popular music and
Yeah.
bring a jazz thing to it. But yeah, it is a dilemma. It'll be interesting to see as popular music styles evolve if there will be better opportunities to take that music and um, turn it into something jazz.
Yeah. So it's one of the things that's quite interesting in terms of that crossover between pop and jazz is Robbie Williams, the singer, who who did a big band um, album and then performed it at the Albert Hall and did a tour of it, and that was a proper kind of almost you know tip of the hat to Frank Sinatra, that kind of lounge style, if you like. But actually, what I've heard recently is I've heard jazz versions of some of his songs, some of Robbie Williams' songs, which is quite interesting because I think that's when it does start to when you hear a song and you go, that's not what I was expecting, and that's interesting.
Right. And yeah, it can be a challenge to put a new spin on something, to put a new hook.
Mm.
The original was usually popular because it really had something going. So how do you take that and also add something new to it instead of
Yeah.
just covering it?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I've always hated that kind of the covers thing where it just sounds exactly the same as the original. I've never seen the point of that.
There was certainly plenty of now forgotten Beatles covers.
Yes, rightly
uh,
forgotten. Yeah. Yeah.
in the instrumental world, and the maybe perhaps the amount of care and thought that was put into them is reflected in their
Yeah.
current status.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to you coming to the UK, and I can sort of show you some of the venues that are really putting on some exciting music now.
That
So
would be fantastic. I,
yeah.
I wanted to mention I only recently learned that one of my favorite saxophonists was part of starting Ronnie Scott's. One of these albums that my brother brought home when I was a teenager or sooner was a Maynard Ferguson album that had Peter King playing alto
Oh,
saxophone.
yeah.
And he only soloed on a couple of songs, but it made a strong impression. And I always wondered what happened to Peter King. Why wasn't he touring? Why isn't he more widely known? But I realized he was a co-founder of,
Yeah.
and I think for many years had run Ronnie Scott's there
Yeah.
in London.
Yeah, that's right. He and Ronnie Scott were partners in crime in that. I think it was really hard for British musicians to make a living as jazzers. I mean, it's hard
Yes,
now, but I think in the sort of 70s, 80s, when those guys were about, it was almost impossible.
right. And I'm glad that they found
Yeah,
a path that worked for them.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, Pete King, he was always the sort of the foil to Ronnie Scott's jokes, and he was the sort of straight man, really, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting how pairs of people do have that dynamic. Sometimes business partners, not just comedy teams.
Yeah.
My spouse likes to talk about it. There are some characters that American children grew up with of my generation. Ernie and Bert, the Muppets.
Yeah.
Very, very much opposites in a lot of ways. And she has a theory, that the Ernie and Bert theory. You've heard it here first. I don't think it's been publicized to this degree, that if you want to have a successful partnership, you need some of those contrasts and complementary skills.
That's really interesting because I think that's true. I think it's you can't have two people working together who are the same because it's just everything becomes vanilla, and I think you need that. I refer to that as the Ernie and Bert theory from now on.
Yes, please help spread the word.
Absolutely, definitely, yeah. Well, fantastic! It's such a pleasure talking to you, Dave, and I genuinely hope you come to the UK or I get over to New York and we can hang out and talk some more.
Yeah, yeah. Let's definitely stay connected, and good luck with the podcast and your own music.
Thank you very much, and good luck with the album.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining me for that episode of Harmonious World, and I hope you enjoyed listening into my conversation with Dave Anderson. Really interesting, and I hope he comes over to the UK very soon. So what you're listening to now is Arms of Maria, which is dedicated to Maria Schneider. It'd be great if you could share this episode with somebody who hasn't discovered Harmonious World yet. Also, check out some of the other episodes. There's lots to listen to. I've been so fortunate to have more than 280 guests. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.